entertaining, talking sports.
What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. May have another New York Giants video up today. We're going to have to wait and see. I'm going to talk a little bit about Freddie Kitchens. But in this video, I kind of wanted to get into a little bit more draft talk. And I'm going to try to get more draft scenario videos up for you guys during the dead time of the offseason. Because right now, if I'm being honest, there's not a whole lot to talk about. But of course, we've got a very important draft coming up in about 2 months. Free agency will be about a month before that. And that'll open up a lot of clarity for the New York Giants in terms of what we need and potentially some other teams may need around us. But one thing I hear a lot of New York Giants fans bring up is, should the New York Giants trade down if we could get player X, Y, and Z at this spot? Would it make more sense to accrue more draft capital? Now, the first thing I'm going to say, in my opinion, the New York Giants should only entertain trading down if there is not a player that they're in love with at 11, and there very well could be. There's 3 great wide receivers in this year's draft class, along with Kyle Pitts. Now, under a scenario in which all 4 of those players were off the board, and the New York Giants felt like they really wanted to improve the offense, but it was too early to draft a guy, say, like Rashad Bateman, yeah, the New York Giants should absolutely look to entertain trade offers of trading down from 11, maybe to 15, maybe to the 20s. And I'm going to go over what exactly I think the New York Giants could get in return and what players they could target if they were to drop back in this year's draft class. Now, of course, a lot of people are going to say this will never happen. Dave Gettleman has never traded down a draft in his life in the first round, which is completely true. But I think we all agree that Joe Judge has more say in this team. We also remember last year where Gettleman said that he was seriously entertaining trade offers from trading down at number 4. And we'll have to wait and see if it becomes possible. One thing that I think that would highly increase the probability of the New York Giants trading down in this year's draft is if one of the 4 quarterbacks that are thought to be the top 4 quarterbacks in this year's draft class were to fall to 11. Who's the most realistic? Probably more than likely Trey Lance. Trey Lance is a quarterback prospect who has a lot of question marks, but he also has very high upside. And if one team were to fall in love with him, I could absolutely see them trying to move up and grab him, similar to what the Buffalo Bills did with Josh Allen in the quarterback draft class of 2018. But we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. And when you take a look at the teams behind the New York Giants in this year's draft class, of course, the Giants are there at number 11. What teams could potentially need a quarterback as of now? Of course, this could all change after free agency, after potential trades. We all know that there's going to be a lot of quarterback shuffling in this year's offseason. You look at the 49ers at 12, they could absolutely use a quarterback potentially. Word is that they're not in love with Jimmy Garoppolo, which would further incentivize teams that may need a quarterback to potentially jump San Francisco into the 11th spot, knowing that they may want to move up and grab a quarterback. And what teams could make sense? Well, out of the teams here, and I wouldn't really want to go much lower than this, the teams, in my opinion, that could make the most sense is New England at 15. Of course, we have ties there. Joe Judge coached with New England, and they could absolutely, at least as of now, use a quarterback. But maybe New England's in love with Mac Jones. Maybe they stay and put. Other teams that could make sense, Washington. But I don't see the Washington football team and the New York Giants making a trade for the simple reason I don't think the New York Giants want to help improve their team. And I don't think Washington would want to give them draft capital. They play in the same division. The Chicago Bears could absolutely make sense. Now, word is that the Bears are, hot in the heels to try to bring in a quarterback via trade. But if that is not to happen, they could absolutely be looking to move up in this year's draft, maybe to 11, if a guy were to fall there that they're in love with. Another team being the Indianapolis Colts at 21. So if you ask me what are the most realistic trade destinations as of now for the New York Giants, it would be those 3 destinations. It would be the New England Patriots, it would be the Chicago Bears, and it would be the Indianapolis Colts. After that, yeah, you could say the Saints maybe, but the Saints are all the way back, I think, at 28. And if I'm the Giants, I probably don't want to fall back that far. New England would be perfect. If you were to fall to 15, you still could potentially have really good prospects fall to you. Maybe even a guy like Jalen Waddle. Maybe potentially a guy like Kyle Pitts, even though I think that's not very likely. Along with, a cornerback prospect, possibly like Farley or Patrick Surtain or maybe J.C. Horn. So I think that's an ideal spot. But if you were to have to fold to 20 or 21, I still think you could get a very good wide receiver prospect there and get more draft capital. And we're going to talk about what exactly I think the Giants could get in terms of draft capital if they were to fold to that 20 or 21 mark. Now, if they were to make a trade with New England based on the point chart, and especially when you're dealing with quarterbacks, the point chart kind of goes out the window. Did a video on this last year where it's almost like 150% of your return according to the points on average when a team trades up for a quarterback in the first round, meaning that New York Giants 1250 is more like maybe 1700 or so in terms of value in which they may get. But each trade is different from one another. But if you look at New England right now, they have a second-round pick at 440. They don't have a third-round pick. And I don't think New England, more than likely, would be willing to give up that second-round pick to jump up to 11. If they were, you definitely entertain that offer, and it's possible. And if you were able to get 15 and their second-round pick at 46, it would allow the New York Giants to absolutely fill some holes. At 15, like I said, you're still going to get a player that could potentially fall into your lap at 11. For instance, let's just say Jalen Waddle was there at 11, and New England was moving up from 15 to 11 to get a quarterback. Say they wanted to move up to get Trey Lance. The 49ers are not taking a wide receiver. They've got a ton of young wide receivers on that roster to begin with, in Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel. I don't see them drafting a wide receiver. The Chargers, they could, but they have pretty good wide receivers on that team as well, and I don't think Minnesota would take a wide receiver at all. That's one of the strengths of that football team. So there's a good chance if you wanted to take a Waddle at 11, he may very well be there at 15. It's a perfect scenario, and if he wasn't, you'd still more than likely be able to get a guy like Surtain or possibly Farley. So I think that's a great spot, especially if you could tack on an additional second-round pick with it. It affords you to kill two birds with one stone in the second round, being that we'd be picking at 42 and 46. You'd be able to get maybe a corner and maybe an offensive guard, maybe an edge rusher and a corner. You'd be able to fill more needs for this football team in a draft in which, we don't have a ton of picks right now. We only have 6 picks. So in the right scenario, if a quarterback was there at 11, I think that makes a ton of sense. In terms of what you could get if you fall down to 20 or 21, well, maybe you could tack on a second-round pick of Chicago in addition to maybe a future third. I think obviously you're going to be getting more draft capital if you were able to fall to 20 or 21. However, if you fall to 20 or 21, more than likely those guys we were just talking about are off the board. I don't think Waddle's going to get there. I don't think the top 2 corners will be there. So what players could you entertain if you fell to that 20 or 21 spot? Well, if you fell to 20 or 21, if I'm the New York Giants, I'm probably looking at a Rashawn Bateman, a Tony from Florida, a guy that really impressed at his Senior Bowl, or a Rondale Moore if you're looking at the wide receiver position. Rondale Moore, when you look at him in film, that guy is special. Let me just get rid of this for you guys as well. Rondale Moore is a guy that, you worry about the injuries, but he would really be electric in this offense. The question would be, could we scheme him open? Something that a lot of people may worry about with him, that he's slight in stature, and Jason Garrett may not be the most innovative mind, but he's a guy that I would definitely welcome here, and I think that's around where he's going to go in that 20 to 25 range. The same can be said for Bateman out of Minnesota. He's 6'2" and is probably the safest wide receiver prospect that you could potentially get there at number 20, along with Kadarius Toney and Rondale Moore. I think those are the 3 wide receivers you're looking at. If you're looking away from wide receiver, I think it's possible a guy like J.C. Horn could drop to that 20 or 21 range. More than likely will be picked by the Cardinals unless, maybe only 1 corner's off the board by the time they pick. So maybe you get the 3rd corner in this year's draft. Or you could potentially go for an offensive tackle like Cosme, Joseph Asai. It opens up a lot of possibilities. He's an edge rusher, of course. It opens up a lot of possibilities for the New York Giants if they fell to that 2021 range. And if the right deal presented itself, and if the right players were already off the board and still on the board in terms of a quarterback when the New York Giants were picking at 11, I think it makes a lot of sense. Now, if you ask me if I think this is probable, no. In the end, I think the New York Giants are going to have a very talented player there at number 11, and I think they're going to take him. I still think they're going wide receiver in this year's draft at number 11. But if they weren't in love with one of these wide receiver prospects, or if they were all off the board and teams were entertaining an option to move up to number 11, I think the Giants should absolutely listen. Being that we have multiple holes on this team to fill, being that it's a very deep wide receiver draft class, you could even double up. Something that I didn't even mention. If you were to trade down to the 2021 range, you could take a receiver at 21, and you could take a receiver maybe in the second round with one of those 2 picks and get yourself 2 good wide receivers in a very deep wide receiver draft class. There would be a lot of options that the New York Giants would have on the table if they were able to trade down in this year's draft class. But we'll have to wait and see. I kind of just wanted to go over that simulation for you guys, give you guys my opinion on what I think the New York Giants could expect in return and what teams they could potentially partner up with in a trade. As always, guys, if you like what you watch, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.